This is our outline, what we're going to be talking about today. So we're just going to get started on the history of our food system. We're going to talk a little bit about food security and what the food security continuum is. And then we'll get into how farmers markets, farmers can support the community through the food security continuum. And then we're going to end off talking about food policy. Okay, so just to get started a little bit on the historical perspective. So I have a couple of pictures here, and these are from Kamloops. So you can see here there's a tomato field in Kamloops, and then also a farm near Kamloops. I'm not too sure what they're growing there, but this just goes to show that the Okanagan and Thompson areas used to be covered in farms. And we've kind of moved away a little bit from that. Like, I've seen pictures of kind of the Glenmore area in Kelowna maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, and it was covered in orchards, and now it's covered in houses and townhomes. So I think, just looking at the difference of what has happened over the last number of years, and just to build on what changes have happened in Kamloops. There used to be 3 tomato canneries in Kamloops, and now there are none. So the historical perspective on this is that in the past, we've really had control over our food locally. So we've been producing, processing, and then distributing our food within the same areas. So this is what our current food system looks like. So our industrial food system, really, the goal of it is not to make sure that our population is getting healthy food. It's to produce as much food as possible and to make as much money as possible. And the reality is we actually don't need any more food. We actually produce, in the whole world, we actually produce enough food to feed every person on Earth. Yet, there are millions of people going hungry. So that's just to put into perspective a little bit of what our industrial food system looks like currently. So our industrial food system has had impacts on our health and also on the environment. So right now, unhealthy foods have become the easiest and the cheapest choice because of this industrial food system. And the fact that these unhealthy foods are the easiest and cheapest choice, it has impacted our health, and there's increasing rates of chronic disease like diabetes and heart disease. And then, so just to build on how the industrial food system is impacting our environment, the average distance traveled by food imports is about 3,000 kilometers. So just think of all of those greenhouse gas emissions that are impacting our climate. So even though kind of the industrial food system and what is impacting it, it's a lot of different factors kind of come into play. But one of the solutions is going back to that more sustainable food system or food sovereignty, and food sovereignty kind of builds more on food security. So food security is really looking at food access, but food sovereignty is making sure that we have control over our food, because we've kind of lost control over how our food is produced, grown, processed, and distributed because of the industrial food system. So part of this solution of a sustainable food system is we need to work with farmers to support this idea of food sovereignty. And this is a little bit of an older stat from 2006 from the BC Food Self-Reliance Report that was done by the Ministry of Agriculture. But BC produces only 48% of meat, fruit, dairy, and vegetables consumed in the province. So more than half of the food that we eat comes from elsewhere.
I developed this food security continuum way back when I started working in food security over 25 years ago, because we all work towards food security in our communities, and there's different stages of food security and action. So stage one is short-term relief. That's when you have people that are hungry. How do you make sure that you've got food at the food bank and food recovery programs? But then you can take it one step further and look at food action, and that's where we see community gardens, community kitchens, a lot of the food action programs. And then you even go one step further to food policy, because ultimately when you have food policy at the municipal level, provincial level, federal level, we have more impact. And farmers have a role to play in all areas of the food security continuum. And I think that's what I really wanted to share today. I was just at the UBC farm session, and we talked about the farm to school, but such a strong role. And I've been fortunate over the years to work with farmers. I'm the co-chair of the Kamloops Food Policy Council way back 20 years ago was Paula Mendelson. I don't know if any of you know Paula. I know Ed from Kamloops would obviously know her. A real advocate, and we both worked with the Ministry of Agriculture to start the Food Policy Council. And the reason why we did that is that we wanted to have a voice within the community to work with government and to work with food action and just increase people's knowledge and programming around food security in Kamloops. So how many of you are involved with the Food Policy Council now? There's a few, one or two, a couple. So you see there's a real role to play. Some of you may not have food policy councils in your community yet, but there could be something going on that you don't know about, and perhaps you should be connecting to see what you could do in terms of, improving the sustainable food system. So I'm just going to go through the membership of the Food Policy Council, and you'll see what a major role the farmers and farmers markets have. So public health dietitians have often been a lead role in establishing food policy councils right across the country. Municipal governments play a key role. We have academic institutions. We have food banks, and often that's where we start. The food bank, when I started my work years ago, was the food bank, because people didn't have enough money to eat. So it's really important to start somewhere, and often that's where people start. Business leaders as well. There's the growers, farmers market, church group. Changing the face of poverty, anti-poverty groups play a big role. Urban planners, concerned citizens, and neighborhood associations. So there's definitely a diverse group. We meet every month, and food is our big component. We have the best potlucks ever, and of course the farmers come with all the great food, and we celebrate our local food system. But we also have a round table. What are you doing in the area? What's the food bank doing? And to give you an example of what happened about 15 years ago, the food bank was saying we don't have enough fresh fruits and vegetables at the food bank. And Mendel Rubinson was there, an organic grower at the farmers market, said, well, why don't you just pull the food bank truck up to the farmers market at the end of the market, and those that want to contribute can do that. Like, as easy as that. Next Sunday, the groups got together when the farmers market happened on Saturday. There was the truck full of food. So it's just as easy as that. So when you meet monthly, we meet the first Wednesday of the month, we make these connections. Same thing goes with community gardens. We needed more community gardens. One of the churches was at the meeting and said, hey, next month we're going to rip up our front lawn and put a community garden for the neighborhood. So it's as easy as just connecting up and seeing what role could you play. So the farmers and the farmers market have a big role to play. So the first stage is food recovery, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about that in terms of the role of the farmers and the farmers market. This is a picture of Dieter Duty up at the right, a long-standing farmer in Kamloops, and what they do is there's a program called JUMP. It's a food recovery program as well, and once again they donate food particularly to that program. So there's a lot of donations that can go on, and we've heard today with that tax credit, which is exciting, which I think farmers have always donated, and there was always the opportunity to get tax credits, but it's really being publicized now. And this is that food share truck that we started, and actually Melissa from Revelstoke is just starting a food recovery program. And on our website, the Kamloops Food Policy Council, we have lots of resources, like how to start community gardens, how to start a food recovery program. So we'll show our resources at the end, but it's very easy for communities to get. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's lots of communities that have already done it. But to give you an idea of the amount of money that can get recirculated back in the community. The Canadian Association of Food Banks say for every pound of produce gleaned, that's $2.50. So it's amazing how much money can get back, whether we go to the nonprofit groups, the food bank, etc. So it's a real contribution. And we also have a Gleaning Abundance program, which has been funded by the Community Food Action Initiative with Interior Health. And we have our manager here, Heather Deegan from Interior Health today. And it's a great program because, I mean, gleaning is from the Bible, right? Years ago, the farmers would grow, and there'd be, cull, and people would come in and get that excess produce. And so that's something which I have heard even today. There's potatoes that are maybe left that aren't being culled. So if you really have produce that's left, vegetables that are left, make sure you connect up with a gleaning group if there's one in your area. Well, so give you an example. Our Gleaning Abundance program, we do work with we work ahead of time. We want to get the fruit before it actually goes to rot on the ground. So absolutely, there is that Good Samaritan Donation Act where when you donate food, you can't be held liable. But obviously, if it's already rotting on the ground, that's not something you'd want to be donating. But that's where we have the food bank actually has a program for the local pigs, etc. So we actually use that in another way. So when we get the gleaned produce, what's not edible, then it goes to the farmer. Well, there's always, I guess, legal to a certain degree. We have some insurance, like our gleaning program has some insurance covered through All Sport, but there's some affordable insurances for folks, and that's what we struggle with because some of the farmers or the various groups want to make sure you've got your insurance, that they're not held liable. So that's an issue, but we're trying to address that in terms of having a more affordable insurance for our group. So, but we don't want to have that as such a barrier, so we try to work around that.
In the Central Okanagan here, there is the Okanagan Fruit Tree Project, and they're another gleaning program. So, and again, it's a very successful program. There's lots of volunteers, and they not only pick fruit, but vegetables, squash, garlic. I think last year they went and picked garlic scapes, and really, really successful programs.
And once again, the municipal governments love it because bear aware, preventing the bears from coming. So often there's some funding that you can get from the municipal government. The food waste. And I just put this food waste in there. The majority of 30 to 40% of food is wasted, which is hard to believe. Did anyone see it was a YouTube, and I think it was Just Eat It. It's on the internet now. Fabulous. It's about an hour documentary. Fabulous to show. It's actually based in Vancouver. A couple that tried to just live on discarded food, and it just goes to show you how much is wasted. And so I just put that to show the farmers in the farmers market. Most of it's at the household level, but there is about 9% at the farm level. So if we can get that back into the community, what a wonderful positive benefit to the community for all those reasons I mentioned.
And just to build a little bit more on the gleaning program too, the Harvest Share program up in the North Okanagan, they secured funding through the regional district as part of their waste reduction or landfill mitigation plan. So there are local governments out there that are willing to support those gleaning projects. So the Farmers Market Coupon Program. So this is a really successful program that's province-wide. And so in 2015, the province funded or provided $547,000 for the Farmers Market Coupon Project. And this is funded through the Ministry of Health. And the program operates in 49 communities, and it connects local farmer markets with local organizations that work with target populations. And these target populations so far have been seniors and then low-income families as well. And so the goal of the program is to really make farmers markets more inclusive of all community members. And so those who do receive the coupons get a minimum of $15 a week to spend at the farmers market. So in many communities, what's happening because there is a limited number or a limited amount of funding available for the coupon project, a lot of local funders are providing funding for on top of that money that's available. So So local funders have actually provided an additional $50,000 towards this program. And also, some communities have created their own coupon projects as well. So there are some guidelines that the farmers markets do have to, or there's certain criteria that the farmers market have to fit in order to qualify for this program, and some farmers market might not qualify. So an example is, and I'm not too sure if it's still going on in Fernie, but when I did live in Fernie about 10 years ago, the Fernie Mountain Market it was a smaller market and it only ran for 2 months. So what they did is they found their own funding and made their own coupons and partnered with the Women's Resource Center there, and they provided $15 a week in coupons for the participants of their prenatal program there. So there are some really innovative ideas happening out there. And then just a little bit of a stat for here in Kelowna. Last year, about $20,000 worth of coupons were actually used at the farmers and crafters market right here in Kelowna. And there are also many First Nation communities across BC that are looking at how they can source funding to expand the nutrition coupon project to their communities. So to have that connection between the First Nations communities and then the local farmers as well. And okay, so now we're going to be moving along to how stage 2 can be addressed on the food security continuum. So Laura's going to talk about community gardens.
So this is whenever we think of food security way back, it was everyone just started a community garden. It's kind of an easy, quick start to do in a community. And where the farmers can get involved, this is Mendel Rubinson, and of course back like 20 years ago we first started, there wasn't a lot of expertise on growing, etc. So they wholeheartedly came out. That was our first community garden. And here's how you start your bedding plants, and here's how you grow. And this is from the Rotary. They gave a rototiller, and Mendel showed us how to use the rototiller. So just a real partnership with the farmers and supporting the community gardens. And as well now, because of course if you start the bedding plants in your own community, they're going to do better in your community garden. So we recommend all our community gardeners to go and buy their bedding plants at the farmers market. And we have educational workshops at the farmers market, etc. The salsa contests and various things. So connecting with the farmer, and obviously during the busy season it's hard for the farmers to get out, but definitely some of them make time to provide that education for the community. And here's all those learning opportunities as well, teaching about growing. We have a public produce site in Kamloops, and so the difference between a community garden and a public produce is food that is grown for the public. So City Hall may in fact have an area, and we did that in Kamloops. We just dug up all the ornamentals and put, zucchinis and all sorts of like edibles. And so when you're paying your taxes, you can go and, pick a tomato. A little bit of a benefit. So that's where we found a lot of the farming community was helpful in the public produce, because what to plant, what grows well here, etc. We work with the master gardener as well, but definitely you can't beat the expertise of the long-standing farming community. Yeah, Melissa. So that's the volunteers again. So we have that volunteer base, and I think that's so important in communities to get that volunteer base. And that's where we heard today at the conference about social media and putting out, we're doing a planting over at this, who can come. So you do need a coordination, and that's for small pots of money. I know sometimes the farmers market have little pots of money, and maybe this is something you could dedicate some sort of food action to sort of coordinate with communities, and how that would be of mutual benefit to the farmers as well. So it's really having good volunteer management is really important, and letting people know when events are happening in your community. We have a fun event. It's salsa sampling, and so the farmers will donate tomatoes and onions, etc. And they have a salsa challenge, and the best salsa, and it's usually for the nonprofit, the Canadian Mental Health Association, and some of the community kitchen groups. So really making it fun, and of course the media coverage. I mean, farmers markets are always looking for good media stories. There was the other workshop about promoting what you do and doing press releases. What a great event is having a salsa contest using foods from the farmers market. So, just being creative and using your media and inviting them to come to your events. We had a really good, who could grow the best, like tomato, and it was involving the farmers market, and there's lots of fun events that you could be doing. This is the Farm to School, and we've heard a bit about the Farm to School program. Actually, there was someone in New West. We talked about the Farmers Market coupon. They're giving kindergarten kids $10. I don't know, somehow in their budget they must have. Anyone from New West here? That was proposing it. They're proposing. I thought, what a wonderful idea, because then you have the kindergarten bringing their family, and then they have a passport book so you can stamp the various vegetables and getting to know the vegetables. Because, I mean, it's still amazing how a lot of children don't know where their food comes from. They don't realize that, you know, peas are grown. And I think of a colleague, Rose Sonif, when she worked up at Williams Lake. The little guy said, I want more of those green pills. And we realized they were peas. So, you know, not knowing where a pea came from. And there's nothing more exciting for kids than digging and finding potatoes. I mean, that's probably the most exciting thing, to dig and see what they can get. So really focusing on our children. So Farm to School is a Ministry of Health initiative, and it's really taking off. I think in communities, this is a real... how would you say, the time is right for farmers to come to the plate with that, because the amount of money that not only the federal government and provincially as well, putting money into that, and also the Whole Foods Foundation, they just put in $500,000 US, which is now like $700,000, and they're giving it to schools. So it's $10,000 per school, and $1,000 of it can go to the farmer in terms of the educational component, and obviously a good percentage of that could be to buy the local farm product. So farm to cafeteria, which is not just like schools, but also public institutions as well. So I should move my slide over here. So that's the Farm to School movement. So the way it works is basically there's sort of three components: hands-on learning for the kids actually in the school, healthy local food in school. So most schools, they don't expect the schools to have local food every day, but at least 2 days a week, it's local food from a local farmer. So that could be a salad bar, that could be a wrap, it could be a soup, you know, during the winter with your root vegetables, etc. So it's not insurmountable, like 2 days a week. And so if you partner with the school district and the schools, you know, there could be some, you know, advantage to the farmers. So in Kamloops, we're going to put 3 schools together, so that's $30,000. And we were going to partner with the Farmers Market Society, but what we've done is the Kamloops Food Policy Council, which includes the farmers. So you want to be at the table for these sources of funding, A, for the education, but B, it's going to support your farm as well. And that community connectedness, it's so important. We want to get the farmers connecting more to the schools and to the community, and making things happen to get that local healthy food. So there's the Farm to Cafeteria. They've got a great website, farmtocafeteria.ca. They've got really good resources. They've got a resource on, you know, how to start a salad bar. So once again, you don't have to, you know, reinvent the wheel. It's there. And if you know some advocates within the school system and the public health dietitians or food action councils, connect up and say, I'm a farmer that would be interested in getting more involved with the Farm to School movement. This Canada Digs In is an excellent resource. There's a PDF of that, really very, very informative, and it gives you examples of what's happening across the province. So make sure you go and download that resource. There's also some really good videos, so perhaps at one of your farmers market meetings, show that video, and it shows the farmers connecting with the schools. So they have received a lot of funding to support farmers in this initiative, so look at some of those resources. Okay, pass it to Jill.
Great, thanks. So another opportunity for farmers to support the health of their communities is through fundraising and marketing. So traditionally, fundraising within schools and other kind of organizations and sport teams have been really selling unhealthy foods like chocolates and donuts, Krispy Kreme donuts, yeah. And so I think this is an opportunity for farmers to kind of infiltrate that that whole unhealthy fundraising thing. And I just feel so bad because like kids come to my door all the time, and it was just a few months ago a teen came knocking on my door, and he's like, "Do you want to buy?" And he held up like a paper with like pictures of what candies he had, and I was like, I'm sorry, but I really don't need any of that food, but if you had something healthy, then I would probably buy it from you. And then he's like, well, jujubes are healthy, aren't they? It says there's real fruit juice in them. And I was like, oh, Actually, no, they're not. I'm sorry. So I felt bad because I really do want to support these schools and community groups in their fundraising activities, but it's just not supporting my health or the health of the community either. So there is an example. I believe this farm bag fundraiser is run out of Summerland, I believe, but don't quote me on that. So what they're doing is they're putting these farm bags of fresh fruits and vegetables together, and then supporting their local schools and community groups, and as providing those as a way to fundraise money. So we've really seen that partnerships and working in collaboration really helps move these food security action projects forward. And I have an example here of a really great partnership from Cranbrook. The Cranbrook Food Action Committee, which is their local food action group, was actually instrumental in getting their farmers market established. So without that local food action group, the farmers market would not even be in existence today. And so that happened in 2009, and these two groups still work together. So, and they do this by cross-promoting their events and workshops. And then the Food Action Committee actually sets up a booth at the Cranbrook Farmers Market, and they sell their beet dip. And the beets they actually grow in one of their public produce installations in Cranbrook. And then they process the beet dip at a commercial community kitchen that they actually helped establish as well.
So this is in Williams Lake, Caribou Growers Co-op, and it's a not-for-profit farmers cooperative. It's open year-round, and it supports over 50 farmers, and it's been growing since 2010. And this is another example of the local food policy council, the Williams Lake Food Policy Council, and Tatiana Bates, who's a public health dietitian, coming together and saying, we need to have a venue for farmers to sell their product. And so it was many, many months and months of work. And here's an example of unused capacity. So this is a gas station that basically very high visibility in Williams Lake. Nothing was happening with it. Got together with the city, and then it was Suncor that owned the building, and they developed the Caribou Growers. And it took a long time. I mean, it was definitely it's still sort of a work in progress. But they actually employ 3 staff as well, and it's open 12 months out of the year. I think it's 4 or 5 days a week, and it's all about partnerships coming together. So they've got the Caribou Grower Farmers Cooperative, and the city's helped with supporting the tax base. They really pay a small amount of the taxes versus what they could be paying. And the office is shared by community policing. So they talked about that diversification. If you're going to have a farmer's market or a co-op, you need to look at diversification, not just the farmer's end of it, because it's a lot of expenses and overhead. So they pay 1/3 of the overhead, so 1/3 of the hydro, etc. So the community policing and then the business improvement area is in there as well. So it's about these partnerships, and this has been very successful. And across the way during the summer is the actual farmers market. So there's a lot of cross pollination between the two. And this is the Farm to Chef Collaborative, so we're seeing more and more Farm to Chef Collaboratives. Kamloops has a very prominent event once a year, and of course you see that Granville Island. I mean, a lot of farming markets have those sort of celebrations a couple times a year, and this is a great opportunity for the farmers to sort of make their wares available. And we also had funding to do a website, so the farmers could go on the website and see what was available and then purchase that. But we do find, there's 3 or 4 restaurants, but more. Like it hasn't had as much uptake as we'd like. So I think this is an area where we've got a few chefs that are fabulous, that are buying the local produce, that go to the farmers market on Saturday or Wednesday, but we definitely need more uptake. So I think that's an area to work in. So back to the food security continuum. So we've seen the short-term relief, like the Gleaning programs and working with the food banks and food share type programs. And we've seen community kitchens and gardens and some of the things that we've talked about. But the big area is this food policy network, if you can actually make changes at the policy level. And just to share my experience with the Kamloops Food Policy Council, because we've had farmers from the get-go on the Food Policy Council, we have constantly been working with our municipal government to push food policy forward. So when you see, this is a diagram, food policy organizations, and they're basically organizations that push food action projects, so all the action projects we've mentioned. Research, there's research that we do as well, food policy and education and networking. So these are the components of a food policy council. It's not just about the policy, it's about the action. And quite frankly, probably the most important thing is the networking and the partnerships that we need to have each other to move things forward. And so what's happened in Kamloops, there's only, I think, 3 municipal governments in BC that have a food and urban ag plan: Revelstoke, Kamloops, and Vancouver. I don't know if any other, and there's it works in play in other communities, but to actually have it adopted by City Council, so that's really exciting. And it was the work that we did in Kamloops over 20 years, and successful community development takes about 10 years, so it's not something where it just happens overnight. It was because we had work in community gardens, partnership with the city, that the trust was there, and we moved ourselves forward. And this is an advisory committee, an 18-member advisory committee. 2 farmer market reps were on that advisory committee because it is a food and urban ag plan. And the vision of Kamloops is a leader in sustainable food and urban agriculture system. So definitely the farmers market had to be there. And we had a stakeholders engagement. So many farmers were at that, and this is just a pictorial. There were restaurants and food retails and nonprofits and academics, and it was looking at how can we make Kamloops more food sustainable food systems, etc. And it talked about the challenges, and we've heard a lot of challenges today. But if we don't have those discussions and put this in policy, we're never going to get further ahead. So the actual document is called Food and Urban Ag Plan. You can just Google that. It's on our website, but you can just Google that. And there's so many points which involve the farmers markets, and there's the Revelstoke food security strategy as well. So these are good examples in your community. If you're trying to get to that gold star in terms of having a policy, these are examples of what other communities have done. It doesn't mean to say once the policy is done, it could just sit on the shelf and not be implemented. So once again, this is why we need to have the Food Policy Council, the Action Council, saying, well, why aren't we doing that, and how can we do that better? So it's important to move that forward. And some of the aspects in that policy is, promoting local foods, promoting farmers markets. One of the recommendations was to investigate the feasibility of the 12-month farmers market, and we have Shirley Culver here from Community Futures, managed to get some funding from Shirley Culver to actually, we just had a meeting 2 weeks ago, which was amazing, Ed? The whole room was filled with almost every producer within our region. I couldn't get over it, from, meat, dairy, produce. It was unbelievable, and also some, potential consultants that could help establish a 12-month farmers market. But it was because of this policy that Community Futures is sort of encouraging that. So it just, one supports the other in investigating the feasibility of that, looking at food festivals like seed lending libraries, workshops, etc. So it was just really exciting to have a policy and have the farmers and the farmers markets very much involved in the development of that.
Thanks, Laura. So just building on that little diagram that was in the last slide. So we're looking at kind of a systems approach to addressing food and food security and food sovereignty. So the food system kind of looks like it really looks at all aspects, from food production and land availability, ensuring that we have enough land to grow the food, so building on protecting farmland and why we have the ALR, and upholding the ultimate goals of the ALC Act is to protect farmland. And so next along the line, the yellow bubble there, we have the food processing and preparing. So a lot of our food is processed elsewhere nowadays, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. There used to be 3 tomato canneries in Kamloops, and now they're not there anymore. So in order to have a sustainable food system, we have to really look at, okay, well, how can we bring back processing into our local areas? And then there's the distribution, retail, and access part of the food system as well. So it's one part to have local food, local organic food being produced and distributed in one area, but then there's the whole access thing as well, and many members of our community can't access food that is grown locally because it is a little bit more expensive, because we want our farmers to earn a living wage. So food is a little bit more expensive then compared to what is imported from other countries that is found at a lot of our kind of big chain grocery stores. So that's one aspect of the food system. So that access part. And then there's the cooking and eating and celebrating, which is my favorite part of the food system. I actually wanted to be a chef at one time, so I really, and actually my partner is a chef, so a chef and a dietitian together, we try to make really delicious, healthy food. So it's about celebrating food, and I think recently we've really become kind of obsessed with what's in food, and I really think it's just about enjoying all food, because I do really believe that all food is healthy food, even some of those processed foods maybe, but just not in very large quantities. So and then kind of to bring that the end to the food system, really looking at waste and resource management. So whether it's composting or gleaning, that kind of ties it all together. And so how does the food security continuum fit into the food system? So we have Stage 1, food access, Stage 2, the capacity building, and then Stage 3, policy. So food access really fits into that distribution, retail, and access area of the food system, which I talked about. And Stage 2, the capacity building, kind of ties into the food processing and preparing. So because of the industrial food system and all of these ultra-processed foods available out there, we've kind of lost disconnect, or we've become disconnect in what it is to actually prepare food. So building capacity to learn those skills. And capacity building also ties into the food production part, again, learning how to grow food. And then also into the cooking, eating, and celebrating part of the food system. And then now policy. So as Laura was talking about with policy, it actually covers all aspects of our food system. So as you can see, the food system and the food security continuum, it is quite complex, and because of this complexity, it's important that we embrace partnerships and then work in collaboration to address all aspects of the food system and then also the food security continuum. And one way that we can do this is to revisit our roots. So going back to those first couple pictures that we started the presentation off with, where there's lots of farms and processing facilities within communities. So this is really what community food security looks like. So having a local food economy, having food co-ops, food hubs, and farmers markets. Having locally produced foods in the stores, in hospitals, in schools, and then in senior facilities as well. And there are some barriers, as Laura mentioned, with some of these larger organizations. There are contracts and free trade agreements that might be barriers to having these locally produced foods in these facilities, but I think we have to start asking more questions about that. Gardens by hospitals and schools. So, and Laura was just telling me the other day that a lot of hospitals and even prisons, like years ago, actually all had their own gardens, and so people were out there, like prisoners were out there gardening, and as a way of producing local food, and then having local or food action education. So workshop opportunities for people to learn new skills, and just to create awareness about local food and opportunities for food action. So some more examples of what community food security looks like. So having food policies that support local food production, processing, and consumption. So all aspects of the food system to support ultimately to have that control over all aspects of our food system or food sovereignty. So having fruit trees and edible plants or public produce in parks, open spaces, and government buildings. And Laura touched on that a little bit. And I actually have a picture here of public produce at City Hall in Kamloops. And that is City Councilor. Yeah, so he is a councillor or was a previous councillor? He still is. Yeah, so that idea of having landscaping, maybe not all edible plants, but a percentage which is available to the wider community, and then having community involvement in maintaining it as well. So community food security looks like having market gardens and farms as green space, and also, and this is actually a new idea within this presentation, but having allowing mothers to feel comfortable breastfeeding in the community as well. So that's definitely food security. Yeah, exactly. Okay, and then something else that really allows a community to be food secure is having farmers making living wages, and having farming as an occupation that people or that young people want to go into. I think ultimately that would really contribute to community food security. And this is an example from Salmon Arm. So the Salmon Arm Food Exchange, they set this up in the early 1900s, and it was a way that the farmers got their produce directly to the public. So it was kind of taking away that middle person. And then also kind of coming from the other aspect of kind of that food access, and not everyone is able to afford healthy locally grown food, is looking at having minimum wage or fixed income earners to make enough money to ensure that basic standards are met. And so we have kind of learned a lot about how there is kind of this idea of income redistribution going on by kind of farmers donating food to those in need, or the Farmers Market Coupon Project. But ultimately, if everyone was able to earn a living wage, then they would be able to afford to buy these foods and to support our local farmers. So Laura mentioned poverty reduction groups that are involved in Food Policy Council. This is definitely an important aspect of the food security system, and then also ensuring that our community is food secure. Okay, so that ends off our presentation. So for more information, so the Interior Health website, if you search food security, we have a number of resources up there, including a number of resources that the Kamloops Food Policy Council has developed, and actually they're on the Kamloops Food Policy Council website as well. And then, so the Food Policy Council that I'm involved with here in Kelowna is the Central Okanagan Food Policy Council. And then another good resource is actually the BC Food Systems Network.